Hi everyone. This is a continuation of chapter 7. We're finishing up the first years of life, and then we're going to move on to how experience shapes the brain. Okay, so before we start how experience shapes the brain, I want you guys to take a quick quiz. So take a look at these three pictures. These pictures are basically neurons at different stages of life. Or I want you guys to pause the video and order these in order from earliest in development to the latest in development. Take a second, think about it, and try to do it in your head. Okay, so let's go over the solution. This is the earliest. This is the middle stage. And this is the third stage. Okay, so let's go over why this is. Obviously, this one would be first because we know that we can see how there aren't that many synapses formed yet, and they still have scope to be formed, right? So this is obviously first. But people tend to get mixed up between 2 and 3, and in fact, I did too. And the reason is we often think that the more synapses there are, the older or the wiser the person is, right? But that's actually not true. Remember, we said here that at 2 years of age, the brain has 50% more connections than the adult brain, while only being 80% of the size of the adult brain. So, what does this mean? What this means is that you have way too many synapses here. Like, it's so disorganized. The way I like to think about it is that a young person's brain is really messy. Brain is really messy because they're young, right? They're messy, they're fast, they're irrational, and toddlers are messy, and that's why their brain is also messy. Whereas your adult's brain tend to be more organized. Adult brains, oops, are more organized and are thus, most importantly, more efficient, right? So you guys kind of understand what I did here with this kind of simile metaphor type thing. When I said that the brain is really messy, what that means is that they're full of energy, right? So they're full of energy, which means that by saying that this is full of energy, what I'm saying is that it takes up too much energy. When adults are raising their toddlers, it takes up too much energy, and therefore they have really messy connections, really unorganized. So this is the brain of a 2-year-old, actually. This is the brain, I think, immediately after birth or to 6 months, I believe. Um, and this is the brain of, I believe, a 20 or of, I think it's somewhere in adolescence or 20 years old, so like 15 to 20-year-old person. Um, and obviously here you can see that they're more well organized and it's more efficient because there's less energy. Adults take up less energy, and as you can see, it's pretty less connected. Okay? So I just wanted to give you guys a quick understanding of that. Just make sure you understood the concept behind that. Yeah, let's move on. So, okay. Did you guys know that monkeys reach full brain size at 6 months? In other words, 6 months after birth, actually. Let's write that down. That's pretty important. 6 months after birth. But do you guys know the statistic for when humans reach full brain size? Humans reach full brain size at 25 to 30 years old after birth. Yeah. And do you guys know why this might be? Okay, I'll let you guys think about that for a few seconds, but let's go over the answer. The answer actually is that humans develop extensively after birth, which means that humans are more dependent on external factors to help them reach full brain size. And What does that mean? Well, that means that basically humans learn from experience, and experience molds the brain. So, have you guys heard that adults usually can't learn, or in other words, when you tend to learn when you're younger? Well, there's a reason for that. When you immediately after you are born, there's a series of periods known as critical periods, which are periods of heightened sensitivity. So let's take some notes here. This is a really important concept in neurology and psychology, actually. So I just want you guys to make sure that you understand. It's periods of heightened sensitivity, sensitivity, in which people are highly influenced by external factors. Sorry. External factors, for example, senses, so any motor, auditory, visual stimuli, and in fact, internal factors such as genes as well. They are highly influenced by internal factors such as genes. So the influences that these factors have, such as your external and internal factors, are really important because the changes that they make on the brain form neural circuits that impact the way you learn for the rest of your life, that impact learning style, that impact the way you learn for the rest of your life. It's also really important to note that during critical periods is the main part, is the main time where synaptic pruning happens. Synaptic pruning, remember, we defined that as mass elimination of synapses as well as neuronal death. Neuronal death, which remember happens because the brain has too many neurons, too many synapses, and needs to eliminate them so that it has enough energy to spend on more important tasks. Majority of synaptic pruning and neuronal death happens at this time, which actually coincidentally coincides with higher learning rates. Higher learning rates. Right? And remember, when we say heightened sensitivity, what we're essentially saying is that kids during these periods are able to realize and grasp material easier. So let's take a look at a small graph that I have here. This is from a study released in 2010. Notice here how your x-axis represents the age in years and your y-axis represents the low to high sensitivity. And this is basically showing you sensitivity in preschool years to school years, right? So when kids traditionally start school, they usually start between the years of 4 to 5. Um, what we tend to see, the general trend here, is that as you become older, your sensitivity to these factors, such as learning numbers, peer social skills, language, symbols, and habitual ways of responding, tend to slowly decrease. In other words, your skills of peer social skills or habitual ways of responding, vision, hearing are mostly determined in your preschool years, which is why it's so important for parents to spend time with their children. And it's also this reason is why a lot of researchers are studying the effects of trauma and growing up in an unloving childhood. Childhood, even meaning from when you're just a newborn. Even from a newborn, that has a huge impact. In fact, for a lot of these factors, you determine most of your personality or you pick up on most of your behaviors around the age of 0 to 1 or zero or from 0 to 2 years old. So it's so crucial that children grow up in a loving home and children grow up in an environment that is supportive to them because they tend to pick up on a lot of their emotional skills, a lot of their emotional habitual instincts early on in life. So remember, we define sensitivity as periods where kids can learn and grasp things the easiest, or they tend to be influenced the most. So an example of this would be even language, right? I brought up language earlier, I believe. And what it shows is that children have heightened language sensitivity around 2 years old. And that's when, if you guys have seen kind of those language um, landmarks, give me a second. Let me just double check what I'm saying. Okay, yeah, so I was right. So basically, if you guys look at the speech and language development milestones, you notice how around when you hit 1 to 2 years, babies should usually start saying their first words. And even before that, their sensitivity is a little pretty high from 0 to 1 years old. During these speeches, I think around 4 to 6 months, you enter toddlers and babies enter the babbling stage where the baby should start making sounds, right? And that's because they have heightened sensitivity during that time. And babies at 7 months to 1 year, corresponding to around this period, they should understand common words such as cup or juice and should respond to commands. They need to pick up on this around this time because if they pass this period, notice how their sensitivity becomes significantly lower and lower and lower, which basically means that they're not able to pick it up as much as if they were to just learn it early on, right? And it's especially peaks around 1.5 years. So when the child is 1.5 years old, you should be basically teaching them language as much as possible because then they'd be able to grasp it as fast as possible. They have heightened sensitivity to it. They can easily grasp the material. Another example that I really wanted to point out was peer social skills. Notice how your peer social skills is heightened around 2 to 3 years old. If I'm not wrong, I believe that autism diagnosis um happens around, let's see here, happens around 3 to 10 years old, or in fact, even 14 to 16 months, which translates to 1 to 2 or even 3 to 10 years. So either way, that kind of marks when your social peer skills and social skills sensitivity begins to heighten. And the reason that autism diagnosis take place during this period, like especially during 3 to 4 years old, I believe for males, is because students are supposed to pick up on certain behaviors like eye contact or interacting or talking or building amicable relationships with their peers during this period of time. But if they don't or they aren't able to pick up on it, what that tells people is that they have it they have a disability, or they have something that keeps them behind, or they probably have some type of condition, so such as autism. And I'd also like to point out that language skills are also impaired in autistic individuals, and notice how their heightened sensitivity points tend to kind of intersect here. And yeah, So that was my lesson on experience shapes the brain. Remember, you need to understand the concept of critical period because it plays a really, really important role in psychology. And it also plays a really important role in understanding how people learn. In fact, people have also correlated alcohol addictions with critical periods and influences during critical periods, such as an abusive household or a stressful environment, such as not getting enough food or not getting enough, basically growing up in very financially poor situations, the effects that that might have on drug dependence or alcohol dependence as well later on in life. So critical periods play a very important role in a child's life because they're periods of heightened sensitivity, which sensitivity means basically very easy ability to grasp. So they're very sensitive to the environment around them and they easily pick up on everything that they see and hear, which is also why you should be very careful what you say around toddlers, right? You guys have heard this before. And yeah, they learn a lot of their social skills and they learn a lot of hearing, all of those during these periods. So yeah, if you guys have any questions, please email me at stemwme@gmail.com. Or if you have any questions that you think can be answered, please put them down in the comments so that if anybody else has that question as well, it can get answered. Thank you. Bye-bye.